Hello and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And this week we are back on the Acolyte Appetite. We're discussing episode number 4 of the Acolyte, titled Day. This episode was directed by Alex Garcia Lopez and written by Claire Kiechel Kor Adana. And we are coming to you live right after 2 back-to-back rewatches because we got a busy week and we got podcast to record. So we're here. We're recording Tuesday night. This is the first for us.
At least with this show. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
We literally turned the show on, watched it, briefly paused,
composed ourselves,
watched it again.
Yeah, sent some tweets off.
Yeah, being on Star Wars Twitter for the release of the Acolyte time is literally gotta tell everyone I'm watching the Star War. You know?
Yeah.
You can't not, because it's happening at a time where a lot of people are watching it as it comes out. This is what culture is all about, you know? Everybody all on Twitter for the primetime television. That's culture, capital C.
Yeah, I think I'd rather watch it at 3 a.m. on a
3 a.m.
Wednesday morning.
Right. I can understand why that's preferable for some.
Or Star Wars Resistance, 10 p.m. on a Sunday night for kids.
I mean, that's when I'm really in my element, but most people not so much. For kids. Yeah, for kids. Yes. I'm really loving the primetime release of this show. It feels really good. Community wise, just it's nice to have something to anticipate in my day. I'm having so much fun, heading to Twitter after the episode is over to enjoy the reactions of everyone. This is great. This is what everybody was doing right when Game of Thrones was coming out. You know?
I think it's exciting. I think it gets the conversation going. I like how much Star Wars, the social accounts are interacting with fans and replying to a lot of fans. And I mean, the Yord Horde content just keeps on coming. I feel like they held Charlie Barnett hostage in the Lucasfilm studio for 4 hours one day. And we're just like, hey, we got to record 4 hours of Yord Horde content. Let's backlog it. They got Yord Horde content for the next 7 weeks, I'm assuming. They're ready.
I'm so happy about that. I hope he was well fed while he was at, the Lucasfilm offices or Lucasfilm studio to record everything. But I'm delighted that we have all the Yord Horde fun stuff. And I love how Swagman is just really involved with the conversation. It makes it so fun. And, we can talk about how streaming is becoming cable TV again. And yes, that is correct. Streaming has figured out how to become cable TV again. Congratulations to streaming for figuring out how it works. But I have to say that I can't be mad about it. It benefits me. That's for sure.
Totally. We're kind of prefacing our conversation with this. And I think this week, and you're probably sure the same sentiment, that primetime feeling hit the most because of that cliffhanger ending, which we're going to talk about. So that was quite the moment for Star Wars Twitter to be like, okay. Okay. Yeah. So, with that being said, we're jumping into spoilers here. So full spoilers ahead, and we are going to dive right into this episode. Sarah, we start on Khofar, which I was very happy to see. I was like, we're getting our boy Kel Naka.
That's right.
But first off, I love the establishing shots that we've been getting in the show between last week on Brundock and this week on Khofar. I feel like it's really giving some personality and beauty to these environments that we're in. It doesn't feel like we're on a soundstage a lot of the times. And I don't really know what the balance was between on location versus Pinewood. I know they didn't use the volume, but I feel like these kinds of shots really make us feel more attached to the worlds that we're in. And Khofar was a pretty cool planet. I don't know what you thought about Khofar overall, but I think the forest was giving Mirkwood from the Hobbit vibes, with the creepy creatures and the darkness and kind of the sense of getting lost in a vast woods. But I had a good time. I probably won't have a good time next week though on Khofar, to be clear. Very bad time next week.
Right. I definitely feel like next week is going to be a terrible time on Khofar. How do I feel about Khofar and the establishing shots? I have so many thoughts about Khofar. First of all, I will always love a green, foresty mountain planet. The vibes are excellent. However, as we discovered both today, as I have been tasked to It's like okay, here's the context. It's like 95 degrees in Illinois this week, and it's humid and it's bad. The plants need watering. My parents are out of town and I've been tasked with watering the plants. That's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea on so many levels. How long do the plants need to be watered? All of these things. But do you know what I really hate? I really hate bugs. This is where we're headed. I really hate bugs. And I encountered bugs when attempting to turn on the spigot today to water the plants, and that was an unpleasant situation for me. But also I found it an unpleasant situation when our Jedi had to encounter the bugs that were wrapped around the trees.
Yeah, OSHA.
That made me
why are you touching? Why are you touching stuff? Go keep walking. Come on.
Yeah, everything about that I did not like. It made me feel bad. It made me feel ucky.
Me too.
I'm not strong enough for bugs. And I was like, crap. I got to talk about bugs this week. And I hate that for me. I hate that for me. But other than that, Khofar is very interesting. I think like the intrigue of the really tall forested trees is very interesting because the establishing shots are beautiful, but then we learn a lot about Khofar throughout the episode. Like, it's massively uncharted. Bounty hunters won't even go here. The forest, people avoid the forest. It's like spooky, it's menacing, and it's never stated explicitly, but like nobody actually goes in the forest. And you probably want to be out of the forest before dark, or like in a safe spot before dark.
There is nothing more that I love than a forest that our heroes get endlessly lost in. Like Forbidden Forest. I said Mirkwood a couple minutes ago. Fangorn Forest. Now we got the Khofar Forest. Like the Dagobah Cave, kind of. It's not like a forest, but it's just like a thing that you go into. That was in the back of my mind this entire episode. I almost got to the point where I was like, is the Tooth Fairy even there? Like, is this kind of a Dagobah Cave situation? I mean, that's a possibility too, but I think that's unlikely. But, maybe this is a forest nexus of some sort. Maybe this forest has kind of unique qualities to it. And that's why Kelnaka ended up going there in hiding.
I frankly think you're onto something with that. And I don't want to get like too far ahead of myself, but like also Osha's like, I'm sensing things better now. I feel like I can stand up to May. She says that while they're in the forest.
Where else we've seen people feel stronger sensitivities to the Force? Speaking of the High Republic, Planet X.
That's right.
Yeah. Not saying this is Planet Next, but I think there is some interesting connections we can make there between our connection to the Force, the strength and the weakness of it, depending on where we're located in the moment. Very particular.
Right. And also who was there. Like Osha was there and the Tooth Fairy was there and May was there.
It's like a Force party. Everybody come, like bring your Christmas goose to the dinner.
Right. Do you know the other connection to the High Republic that I was thinking about during this episode? And I'm just kind of talking about this within the context of Khofar, so I'm not messing up our plan to how we're going to talk about this episode.
Strict order that we came up with 5 minutes before we started.
Of generally following the episode. Okay. But if I can talk about the bugs, as much as I don't like the bugs, may I suggest that they've never done anything wrong. And then Sol killed one of them. And then Osha felt bad about that. She was like, I sensed it. It awoke. Sol killed it. And now I feel some regret. I feel some guilt about that. And I was like, interesting. It's almost as if the bug never did anything wrong, just like the Nameless.
Yeah, I did have that moment of, are we going to save the bug or are we going to kill the bug? And Sol goes for the kill. It's interesting because we know the Jedi are all about for light and life. They're always on the defense, right? Like they don't attack unarmed beings as far as we know. And it was interesting the way that like Jackie, I know we're kind of jumping ahead there, but I think this is a good part to bring it up. Like Jackie saying it's always an honor to get to witness anything or anyone transform into the Force. And I was like, okay. That's certainly a way to justify like the killing of a creature that you disturbed in its own environment. And granted, like Osha does feel guilt for that, and Osha has that self-awareness, but like do the other Jedi around her have that self-awareness of what they just did? Because that creature was not bothering anybody. And so I think if we fail to look at the past and learn from it, as Soul says in episode 1, you know, we're doomed to repeat it. And so maybe this is an instance of where we're doomed to repeat the past, where we've injured creatures and maybe not rightfully so, you know.
Murdering the nameless.
Yes.
Murdering the nameless.
Yeah. So again, who knows how that will be wrapped up in the High Republic books, but that was an interesting conversation, and we'll talk a little bit more about Jackie and Osha throughout this episode, because there's some good meat in that conversation there as well.
Right.
But any other thoughts on Khofar before we jump over to your boy's hut?
I think those are all the thoughts I have on Khofar the place. I think it's just a very kind of interesting place, and I like how much is left unsaid. We get a lot told to us, but also a lot is left unsaid about what happens there.
Great point. I love when there's just enough intrigue that's still left over for you to chew on for a little bit.
Kind of like how the Kazrath device needs both the dark side and the light side.
Oh my god!
In order to be used.
All right, I'm revoking pod privileges from you for the next 30 seconds as I transition us before we go off on the Kazrath tangent. Oh, okay, she's counting. All right, I gotta go. So, what also gives us a lot to chew on is Kel Naka's hut, because that boy, that Wookiee, he ain't doing too hot, Sarah. This was your man. I give you permission to speak freely. You can speak freely, Sarah. You can speak freely.
You gave me a 30-second pod pause, and
I'm taking you out of pod jail.
Did you release me from pod jail early?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. You behaved very well in pod jail, so I gave you an early out.
I appreciate that. I forgot what your question was.
Kel Naka's hut. Man is cooking some dinner. You know, we think he's doing well. He's cooking his veggies, trying to get his protein. He is clothed, which I think is confirmation that at the end of episode 2, he was coming back, and the people that were there were trying to steal his clothes on the clothesline. That was the plot.
I'm making that headcanon. Prank him.
Yeah, they're like, prank him. Kel Naka, we finally found his hut. We're gonna steal his clothes. Naked Wookiee. Kel Naka's like, I got like 20 robes in my drawer in my hut. Joke's on you. You thought.
But also, does that the fact that he's wearing clothes now confirm the fact that he was indeed naked? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, it does confirm that. We had a naked Wookiee, our first fully naked character, perhaps, in Star Wars.
I'm gonna put you in pod jail.
Because Chewbacca had the decency to have a sash.
The bandolier? Just the bandolier. Yeah. Like, I like how any accessories, like, okay, well, the Wookiee's not naked anymore. But like, if he's not wearing, he or she is not wearing an accessory, that's like, that's nudity. Even if the accessory is not like covering anything that would typically be covered. I think that's very funny. I also listened to a lot of our friends and peers around the Star Wars community's podcasts on the Acolyte. I was so excited to like engage in the conversation about it. And so many people mentioned naked Kel Naka. I was like, oh, everybody's on the same page here as Brad. And wow,
that's what being chronically online does to one's mind.
Right. It was like, well, that's a naked Wookiee. Anyway.
That's one big boy.
They stole his clothes. He's trying to make some dinner, get all his nutrients. Yeah, he's just out there living life. And we see his walls. And his walls are, it's giving
Aslan Rel.
It's giving Aslan Rel. I was like, oh, it's also giving Spock in like season 2 Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah,
like he kind of has a mental break and like starts writing all over his like room. He's like padded cell essentially. But yeah, it's giving Aslan Rel. It's giving. That doesn't feel so good actually. Also, considering we know the fact that he left his post and ran away into the forest sometime in the last year, and nobody's heard from him.
Yeah, that's a bit alarming. First off, why did it take us so long to ask, hey, is Kel Naka okay?
Yeah, we haven't heard from Khofar lately.
It's been a while.
One
might say it's alarming. Yeah.
like a report in. Hey guys, everything's good
Right.
on Khofar.
Like, hey,
So
why are
here,
Naka's Amazon packages? They've been piling up outside his hut for like a year. Wellness check time.
right? You'd think,
Mm-hmm.
especially since part of the High Republic, books was like they're setting up long range communications. Yes, this kind of was a little bit spoiled by the Starlight Beacon falling, but like they're still setting up long range communications throughout the galaxy 100 or 200 years prior to this.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's the status of that? Because again, why haven't we heard from Khofar?
And that maybe begs the question: did Kelnaka want to be in communication with anybody too? I guess on
No,
the
the
other
answer
side
is
of the
no.
equation, no. I think it's a certain exile. Maybe not as far as the Barash vow, but part of me wonders, the amount of guilt that Kelnaka feels for that night, given what we've seen in trailers. It looks like Kelnaka attacks Torben. Kelnaka noticeably not a part of that crew at the end of episode 3. He's absent. Has he been detained? Has he been put in kind of like a jail for attacking another
Oh,
Jedi? Is there some guilt there, perhaps? So I think
oh,
there's a lot of questions about how the responsibility he feels for what happened. And part of me wonders, did he really get killed? Or was it an act of taking one's own life, like we saw with Torben in episode 2? Did Kelnaka take his own life? I think more than likely he was killed at the end of this episode, but that thought did pop into my mind. I was like, he's sitting in his chair, right? He's not up and about. It doesn't look like he was in battle. It looks like sitting in his chair contemplating, and maybe the drawings, maybe the visions that he's seeing. So the question is, like, why is Kelnaka drawing these symbols everywhere on the wall? There's slight variations between each of them. Is he having flashbacks? Is he trying to make sense of something from that night? Maybe that symbol is a calling card of sorts. He's trying to work out the equation in his mind. Is he trying to summon somebody? That my brain rot was like, is he summoning the Tooth Fairy? By
okay.
you say Beetlejuice 3 times and Beetlejuice shows up. Maybe if you draw enough of this stuff on the wall, Tooth Fairy comes knocking on your door and says, "Hey, you called? Need a toothbrush? Perhaps."
Need a toothbrush.
Just
Perhaps.
kidding. It's a lightsaber.
Right. Rip.
R.I.P. boy.
Okay. So I kind of want to. Can we talk about the symbols? Can we talk about that? Maybe we can
Yeah.
dive into that. Okay. I'm no expert on any of these things, but there are clear parallels between all of these things. So I think it's worth kind of bringing them up in a little bit more detail. Um, so forgive my relatively rudimentary knowledge. If you know more about me, than me about the Prime Jedi or the Yin and Yang, good for you. Please don't, please don't judge me too harshly. But we see the yin and yang being from Chinese philosophy. This is from Wikipedia. Thank you, Wikipedia. Describing an opposite but interconnected, self-perpetuating cycle. They can be thought of as complementary rather than opposing forces to interact to form a dynamic system in which the whole is greater than the assembled parts. So they're not necessarily opposed to one another. And I think that's perhaps misinterpreted from the yin and yang, at least in like popular zeitgeist. When I went to the Star Wars Day conference, it was really interesting because the very last talk of the day actually compared Reylo to the yin and yang and talked about their journey through that specifically. So shout out to Dr. Smith. His name was Dr. Smith. That is a very basic name, but it's true. He was a philosophy professor. Anyway, so the yin and the yang as these complementary forces that each have a little bit of each other in them. So there's a sense that, they can. Wow, if I had more time to prepare this episode, I would have read more. But alas, we are doing our almost instant reactions. Again, don't make fun of me, guys, if you're listening. But the the opposites together complementary. Yes, yes. Then we have the Prime Jedi. If you recall, listener, back to um The Last Jedi, a movie we happen to like, there is this mosaic of the Prime Jedi on the floor inside at Octo. And so the Prime Jedi from Wikipedia is an individual who became the first Jedi to ever use the Force, and they were the founder of the Jedi Order. Um, and the mosaic is of the Prime Jedi in a state of meditation and balance. And so we see the sort of stylizing of the yin and yang with the white mosaics with the black circle, etc., and like the opposites are half. So one half is light, and one half is dark. Balance, if you will, right?
Imagine
some
that.
lightness, some darkness, some complementary things. Kind of need to have a little bit of everything in order to be the Jedi. Anyway, let's see if there's anything else. Pablo Hidalgo, yada yada yada. Great, cool. Then we get to the Coven. They do not have a name other than the Coven right now. Mother Anastaea's Coven, but it seemed like it went on for long before her. And she has this dotted marking in the center of her forehead and then kind of at the middle of her chin. And it also evokes the yin and the yang. Although there's not like a different coloring because it's on just a line, it has both of the dots. So there's the idea of these complementary forces or this interconnected sense of like a circular motion, right? I'm saying nothing. I'm attempting to say something, but I'm really saying nothing. We're just rolling with it. And so we see Kelnaka drawing this over and over and over and over again on the walls. And I find that to be really compelling because the Jedi obviously have their own way of understanding the Force, as do the Coven. So it does feel to me that Kelnaka is potentially stuck on this and is trying to discover some mystery of the Force, and hasn't been able to crack it. I don't know. That's my thought.
I think those are great observations about the imagery and kind of connecting many of the visual motifs of Star Wars that we've seen. Again, taking many more inspirations from The Last Jedi. I think there's definitely something there. But I had mentioned Aslan Rel as well because, Aslan from the High Republic, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a character who for 150 years was so ridden by fear that the fear alone kept him alive. And he was often seen scribbling on walls, and these were things that he was told in visions and by forces much larger than we can even comprehend, right? So these things that instilled so much fear in him, the only way he could really work through it or compartmentalize it at all was by writing it anywhere he could, on a surface, on a wall, on a piece of paper, you name it. So I think Kelnaka, maybe there's some sort of if we were to believe that he was possessed, I think we should think about possessed on the night on Brundok, right? We also know that Torben was possessed or in some way where his eyes became black. We think that Kelnaka had the same thing where his eyes were black in one of the trailers. So that makes me wonder, like, did each of these characters see something when they were under that state of mind to where it's rooted? Yeah, it's been rooted so deep within their subconscious that now it's manifesting in new ways. For Kelnaka, it's this isolation, it's the writing on the walls, it's trying to make sense of an endless equation. And for Torben, maybe it was too much after however many years that he took the Barash vow and went into a deep meditation, much like the yin and yang, right? Like you mentioned the word meditation there, to make sense of something, or to make sense of the Force in a way that he didn't know to make sense of before. So I think there's something there between those two characters and them being the ones to fight each other. But let's jump over to Coruscant, because I think we've talked quite a bit about Kelnaka here. Going back to Osha and Jackie is having a training session, and I think it's really interesting setting up the beginning of this episode with, I believe his name is Master Lakshay, who's played by Paul Bullion, and
with
he
this
is
handsome
very handsome
Jedi Master who honestly could wear that same like cape robe and walk off the Rings of Power set. You know what I'm saying? Like the hair, the vibe, it's
The beard.
giving, it's giving lives in Middle Earth.
Totally. But it was really, really cool to see this session, but setting up the episode where they're talking about maximizing defenses without a need to strike, and then comparing that to the very end of the episode where the Jedi kind of just jump right into the action with no sense of direction, no maximizing of defenses, nothing of that sort. It's very reactionary. It's immediately on the offensive, and they lose their ground right away to Tooth Fairy.
You're 100% right. But also, like, if I were the Jedi and I've never seen a red lightsaber before and I've only heard about them, I would do the same thing. Also, they're very close. Tooth Fairy was all up in a civilian's personal space. I feel like that's enough for the Jedi to be like, gotta go. But also, that is not just any civilian. It's Osha, and she's super important, former Jedi. So
True. Osha and Jackie's conversation in this moment, I don't know about you, and maybe it's like the pacing of the scene or like the camera work. It felt a little stilted in some ways. Like it just kind of felt a little awkward. Like I liked what was being said, but the kind of pacing of it was a bit off for me. Nevertheless, I think this sets up a bit of a banter between these two characters, almost like flirtatious in a way, potentially.
do they like each other?
Do they?
I mean, Osha's out here like, we'll trade stories about Master Soul. We're going to go to the bars. I don't know if that's not, I don't know. Could be a date.
Could be. I love the idea. I want to be a fly in that wall if they're in a cantina talking about Master Soul. Like what truth bombs are they dropping? What stories are they sharing? Soul has done some embarrassing things. I just know it. He's got that like dad nature in him. He's done something dumb at some point.
Or they can be like, you know, kind of complaining like, oh, remember when Soul does this thing and it's so annoying and it's so endearing, but like, it's like, ugh, cringe.
But also it's cool to see two different characters who are trained by the same person. Cause I can't think of many examples of that within Star Wars, maybe aside from like Rey and Kylo, who were both kind of trained by Luke in a way. So there's that dynamic of just like, let's talk about our guy that we both learned from, which I think is kind of a fun dynamic.
Not learning from specifically, but like Vanestra and Stellan and Elzar and Stellan.
Yes.
Like two people who have a really strong relationship with this one person, and that puts them at odds in some ways.
100%. That's another great example. But what this conversation too really illustrated was Jackie. I think her personality really came out. You could tell she's very like perceptive, very empathetic, great listener. I could talk to Jackie for days, I feel like, and tell her my life story and all my anxieties and things I think about. And she could be my therapist. Maybe Jackie, I don't know. What are your rates?
I think Jackie's pretty thoughtful.
Yeah.
And she seems really friendly, and she seems like the right kind of Padawan for Soul.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I didn't mean to just be like, hey, Jackie, I'm going to trauma dump on you. Not really. But in all seriousness,
I mean, you were asked, you didn't trauma dump. I mean, Jackie is a fictional character, but you didn't trauma dump on her. You asked, hey, what are your rates so that I can trauma dump on you once I pay you. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what therapy is.
Point being, I feel like Jackie would be the friend to have in the Star Wars universe. Like those quizzes that has the question, oh, who would you take on a Star Wars adventure? Like who would be your co-pilot? I might select Jackie.
I feel like Jackie in the first few episodes here, she's great. She's got good plans. She's communicating with new people on planets. You know, she's smart. She has a different perspective than maybe the average person. Yeah, Yeah, and she's not afraid to bend a rule when a rule needs to be bent. And I think that is an important trait in this show because, you know, when you have somebody who's not willing to bend a rule necessarily, they're very stubborn about it. You have Yord. And I mean, we love Yord, but as Jackie says, he's Yord.
And I think we'll see more of Jackie break out of that shell because in the first episode, she is sort of poking at Soul for keeping attachments and looking at a hologram of his apprentice. But now I feel like she is really, again, like coming out into like this kind of new persona, maybe because she met Osha and because they bonded. And Osha is this outsider who left the Jedi Order and wasn't quite the Jedi she wanted to be. She admits it in this conversation. So maybe to Jackie, that's compelling and intriguing, and she wants to connect to that because maybe on a deep level she feels that in some way of, do I want to be a Jedi too? And I think she does, but maybe there's some insecurities there that she wants to explore a little bit through Osha's experience, and that's why they've bonded so much in some way, right? But speaking of, we mentioned Soul, we have a Jedi meeting, and guess who shows up to the Jedi meeting?
Well,
he's got two brains, and I'll give you a hint. That's the hint. Sorry, he has two brains. I said that out of order. If only I had two brains, I would have said that right.
If it isn't Ki-Adi-Mundi. Ki-Adi-Mundi?
Yeah.
I don't say his name aloud enough. It's Ki-Adi-Mundi, right?
Yeah. Could be whatever you want, right?
Ki-Adi-Mundi.
It could be whatever you want.
Somebody's going to clip that and be like, she's not even a real Star Wars fan. Guys, I've been doing this podcast for 5 years and I've been a fan for far longer, and I still mess stuff up all the time.
So Ki-Adi-Mundi walks into a room. Here is this guy, droid attack on the Wookiees. We know him. We could point at the screen and be like, that's the guy.
That's the guy.
And and it was confirmed in the credits. That is the guy. You don't just throw a Sorelian into Star Wars and it's not Ki-Adi-Mundi.
In the prequel era, especially. Yeah,
right. Yeah. There's only one Sorelian. I think it's Sorelian. I think that's the species. But they're having this conversation about May, who has returned and now killed 3 Jedi, and Ki-Adi-Mundi makes this comment about an apprentice who doesn't know their master. Absurd. And they're talking about, like, is this a splinter order? Is it something worse? If it was a splinter order, we would know about it. And I think like these conversations, this murmuring is really hitting home that the Jedi think too highly of themselves as a source of truth. It's that if it's not in the archives, it does not exist mentality, right? It's like they have a serious case of tunnel vision and they're not willing to look beyond what they know and actually examine their blind spots. And I think the show is really planting those seeds of the Jedi's hubris. And they don't truly know what they don't know. And they're not really willing to admit that in some ways. And I think this meeting was a great example.
I think what's so interesting is Vernestra thinks that a Jedi taught May. And she's questioned, like, how do you know? And she goes, even a hologram can tell me that. So I think from that, we can infer that the Tooth Fairy is utilizing known Force materials, maybe artifacts or writings and teachings, in order to harness the Force in a similar way to the Jedi, but with obviously a very particular, sinister sort of twist. But like, I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that if he's not a member of the Lost, which if the Tooth Fairy is a lost Jedi and is not Chimere, then I feel like they would be like, well, shit, we know Dan left the Jedi Order 10 years ago. What's Dan been up to? We totally lost track.
Dan, number 17, Dan.
Lost 20, number 17. Master Dan. We can give him 2 N's and then it's like man, but Dan.
Right.
Yeah.
He actually added the second N in his name because he loved Elzar Man so much.
It's actually it's his middle name. He's actually W Dan. W Dan Guy.
What does the W stand for?
Walter.
Okay. I was gonna say it stood for wait a minute, I don't want to be a Jedi. That's why I became Lost 20.
Right. So yeah. I feel like they would be like, oh crap, here's this other scandal that we don't talk about, because, you know, they would put two and two together, I would hope, if that were the case. So I'm kind of thinking that's not the case. And the Tooth Fairy has come up by his own means or by another master who has pulled from known Force sources. You know, Octo is around.
Right. And also examining Splinter Order as a phrase, I think like going back to that is really interesting because they don't say, could this be the Sith?
No, again, they're too up in their nice tall tower to be like, Sith? I've never heard of those.
Right. It has to be a Splinter Order.
There's
and it
no
sounds
way.
like they've dealt with Splinter Orders before. So, you know, how many, what were the characteristics of those orders? Do they consider the Witch Coven a Splinter Order that they've dealt with in the past, you know, and if they've treated the witches that way, how have they treated the other Splinter Orders that they've dealt with? You know, again, that amassing of power by one single institution and controlling who can be wielding the Force and who cannot be, right?
Right.
And there's conversation about alerting the High Council, which I would presume is like Yoda and Yariel Poof and Appa Rancisis, all of those Jedi Masters who sit in their ivory tower, and they say they would inform the Senate, and a scandal would inspire fear and mistrust. Vern recommends dealing with this themselves, which first off, bad idea, Vern. You should know better than to just be like, oh, we're gonna like keep this thing a secret, because if you all die, the knowledge dies with you of what happened. First off.
Feels like that's where we're headed. No lie. Yeah. I feel like that's where we're going. Because, you know, we make the same mistakes in 100 years. So,
yes.
LOL.
Right. It's like Anakin and Mace only being the ones that know about Palpatine going and dying, and then it's, you know, misinformation galore.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is really interesting, and we didn't talk about this in the first episode, but Vernestra in that one also mentions political enemies, about, you know, what would happen if people found out one of their own killed another Jedi. And so I think this is just noteworthy to point out that we're talking about politics, we're talking about scandals and fear and mistrust and political enemies. Those kinds of words being flung around by Jedi, I think, is showing the slow osmosis effect of Jedi politics, soldiers, war, all of that. You know, that's going to really corrupt them at their core eventually.
It's also particularly interesting considering the end of Defy the Storm, spoilers for the very last chapter, like literally the very last chapter of Defy the Storm. So, you know, skipped a minute if you don't want to hear that. But when Vernestra is like, hey, Elzar, bestie, actually, I hate you. I don't really hate you, but like, I don't trust you anyway. So you should definitely tell the council that you killed Chancey Garo. You should definitely do that. And he's like, what? I mean, yeah, I guess I didn't mean to kill her. And she's like, yeah, I get it, but like, you still did. And he's like, yeah, I do carry a lot of guilt about that. And she's like, well, that's great, but you should tell somebody about that. Specifically, you should confess to the council. So I find it interesting now that she's like much older and has many more things had gone on in her life, and be like, we're not telling the council about this one. Actually, we're not doing that. And I think that it's interesting also that there is a meeting room just in the Jedi Temple that like is a strategy planning room. Certainly. And that there is a meeting of Jedi Masters that the council just does not know about. And one of them being a very, very old, not derogatory, old, literally old, very well respected, I would imagine. Very experienced with a lot of bad things, the Nameless, the Path from Mari Santeca in her head. You know, like, it's interesting to me that she is not associated with the High Council in that way.
You know, talking about Vern and the truth and admitting things, she has a lot of, I don't know if it's anger, more so disappointment with Soul. Soul, why didn't you tell me that there was a possibility May could have survived 16 years ago? Like, why didn't you say anything? And it's interesting that she says, why didn't you say anything to me, versus why didn't you say anything to like the Jedi at large? Like, why didn't you tell the council? It's not about that. It's about, why did you tell me?
Maybe she's like the director of outpost operations.
Mm. Yeah,
Maybe
that could be.
She's like outpost manager.
Uh-huh.
Like, you should have told me what happened on your outpost.
Yeah,
That was serious
that
business.
could be. That could be. She's very stoic in this episode. I almost feel like she's kind of being portrayed not as a bad guy, but she's sort of the antagonist. She's like the antagonist of the Jedi Order in the sense that like she seems to be the one that is the gatekeeper of our heroes doing the things they want to do. It's like, oh, we got to get past Vernestra if we want to go on this mission. We got to if we want to strategize, we got to go through Vernestra first. Like she's kind of that like guard.
She doesn't strike me as like an antagonist, but she strikes me as a gatekeeper.
Yeah. A gatekeeper is probably the better word, more so than
like she's clearly somebody who is attempting to maintain a particular image and attempting to maintain a particular status quo. And that feels very indicative of where the Jedi are headed.
And she doesn't want Sol to go on this mission. The only reason she buys into it is because Sol makes a great point. If I can give May what she wants, she'll listen. Or, we might get through to her, and that's going to be Osha. But Vernestra's point about her fearing that there's kind of a larger plan happening, one that could tip the scales, she's not wrong. The question is, what truly is the master plan? Who is orchestrating it? How many people are involved in the master plan? And I have some feelings about what that master plan is when we get to Tooth Fairy section later in this episode. How do you feel about Sol offering up Osha? That's kind of our last moment on Coruscant is Osha and Sol talking.
Kind of bad. Like, I feel a little funky about that. Because Sol has not fessed up to Osha about what actually happened. And we get that, I'll tell you everything when we get back to the ship with May. And somebody on Twitter wrote, he's dead. And I was like, you're so real for saying that. We're probably not going to know from him, at least. I think May and Osha might have to piece it together themselves after reading that tweet. But Vernestra is also like, why didn't you tell me? Right, you mentioned this. But then he says, I saw her fall. No one could have survived that. And so he did a really he didn't even put her name in the records. She's not in Osha's official record as having a twin. So there's still something a little, because did Vernestra know she had a twin?
I got the sense that Vernestra knew, but Vernestra was confident that the twin was dead because she makes the point of, why didn't you tell me there was a chance she could have survived, not why did you tell me there was a twin?
Right.
Yeah.
But if you go to Osha's record and back in episode 1, right, it's like, oh, well, you have a twin? Wait, what?
Very interesting who has the information versus who doesn't, where it's stored, where it's not.
There's definitely a sense of Yord knows, but it's not in her official record. There's something off here about all of that and the information that people have about her. I don't know.
Yeah, and I keep trying to figure out is Sol's responsibility with what happened to May intentional? Is it a lapse in judgment? Is it that moment where Luke goes in to Ben's hut at night, takes out his lightsaber, and has a moment where he's like, I shouldn't have done this. And then it's too late at that point, right? Is that the same lapse in judgment Sol had on Brendock where he could have saved both? I had sent you a voice message that hey, in the first episode, Sol uses the Force to stop Osha from falling.
Yes.
On Brendock, he grabs Osha. He doesn't force pull her up. Physically grabs her off the cliff. Could he have also force levitated May as she fell? Nobody could have survived that fall. Well, nobody could have survived the fall Osha had on the cliffside, but you saved her there.
Yeah.
So my part of me is is there some intentionality with him not saving May? And is that what he's trying to own up to when he tells Osha, hey, you're going to face the past. I'm also going to face the past. It's going to be difficult for us. What does he mean by that? It's not just a failure. It feels like a forced error in a way that he made. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. But regardless, Sol is a great guy. He's never done anything wrong in his entire life. Because he has some beautiful moments here with Osha where he says, When I told you May, when I told May you were alive, her eyes softened. She became a different person. There is still good in her, the part of her that loves you. These are some great words spoken by Soul. It echoed Padme. There is still good in him. I know it. The softening of the eyes. The eyes are a window to the soul, as you've said previously on this podcast when we've talked about the Nameless. But I think these are all like really just like it's just a good moment hearing this from Soul. Feels genuine.
Yes. And in this essay, I will. I think it's 100% genuine. And I think he is right. And I think that we see this later on. It's all about intention, is it not? The Force is all about intention. And May has been on this revenge quest to avenge the death of her sister, we assume, to avenge what happened to her people. But it doesn't come from a place of evilness. It comes from a place of pain. And so when that pain is functionally resolved in the fact that, like, oh my gosh, my other half, my sister, is alive, as May states, she realizes that, like, her revenge quest is silly. She has no need to avenge them. My loyalty is to Osha, not your master. I just want to make that like really clear. My loyalty is to Osha. That is May's fundamental thing, because it's not that she actually like wants to cause people pain because she has that desire in her, like she's not into that. She wants to, in her mind, rectify the harm or avenge the harm that came to her sister. So also, I think it's really interesting that she identifies Chimere as the Tooth Fairy as Chimere's master. She's like, I'm not even associating with the Tooth Fairy anymore. I don't even need to do this deal anymore because I don't feel this pain anymore. It doesn't manifest in the same way in my mind. I therefore do not need to kill an unarmed person. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but can we kind of talk about everything May and Chimere here?
Yeah, I think we were going to kind of go there next. I think my only other point with Osha in this moment is just her mentioning how May is a murderer. And again, this hesitation that she doesn't want to face May. But to your point that you referenced earlier, May is feeling different Osha is feeling different on this planet. She has a sense, she's sensing things again in a way that gives her the courage to face May. You said that Osha doesn't have it maybe in her to be that aggressor, maybe be that to take a life potentially, right? But I think there is some precedent in episode 3 where with that butterfly in the beginning of the episode, we both see them freeze the butterfly and do harm to it, right? Like Osha knows how to pull back in that moment. May doesn't. Osha kind of has to say, May, stop it, to really get her out of that. And so my question will be, are we getting to a point in the show where May is having a change of heart and maybe Osha is having a renewed connection to the Force that is back? And it's kind of that influx of feelings that she doesn't know what to do with and how to juggle those feelings to where the dark side becomes a little more tempting. And maybe she kind of loses track of where to pull back and when to pull back and what is the line that you cross when you do cross that you can't go back, right? Is Osha going to lose that clarity? Even though now, because of that like deep-rooted vengeance that she has, that Soul is trying to say, hey, but she's family. Pull back a little bit. Like, she's still your sister.
Right. Yeah, Osha has come to a conclusion about May. She said, there's essentially, she's relieved that she's alive. She knows that she can't take her life, but she's also come to the conclusion that she's a murderer and she's different from me. And I can't be with you on this mission because at the end of the day, we've gone on 2 diverging paths.
And maybe she doesn't trust what she would do at the end of the day. Maybe she's scared about what that showdown would mean for her. If I face May, I don't know if I can control myself. I want to, but do I have the courage to do so? Do I have the wherewithal and the discipline? I've been out of the order for 6 years. What could happen?
Can I give you another episode 5 or beyond prediction?
Yeah, absolutely.
So on the one hand, Soul, I'll tell you everything when we get back to the ship. Dead, goner, goodbye. On the other hand, we get May. We're back to the ship. Hey, Osha, here's what actually happened. Osha now feels that her entire life has shattered again because Soul, in some way, failed her, lied to her, did something so egregiously wrong in her mind that it has shattered her sense of self and her sense of the world around her.
That's a great prediction. I would say that is more than likely if Osha makes it back to that ship and not another person's ship. That's all I'll say.
I also think that is possible. Like I think everything everything is kind of on the table in this moment, which is really exciting. Because, you know, May is having her Ben moment of, I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
Yes.
Right.
100%. Yeah.
But even that line, which he does cross, is not what he truly feels because he hesitates in that. He's doing it because he feels that he needs to be something and that he's being told that this is what he needs to do in order to be that thing, not because he is evil. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a difference between who Palpatine is, which is, if you ask me, pretty evil, kind of through and through, and who Ben is or who May is or any of these characters that are tempted to the darkness, but that's not where their truth path lies. Like Ben and May are dealing with like a lack of closure and emotional maturity more than like a deep sense of hatred in their heart. You know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, Palpatine to me kind of has just like a deep sense of hatred in his heart. He's like, I will ruin everything and I will delight in it. And I will act as if we are buddies and that if things are good, but really I'm just moving the chess pieces and I'm winning because I play by myself. You know, I don't know. Like also if you look at the duo between Kylo and Hux, like Hux is the one with the big master plans and the red string connecting all of his evil plans and he'll cackle at them. You know, like it's not Ben.
Yeah, Ben is more so a pawn to a much larger scheme, which I think May is also, and this is a great place to start talking about Chimere and May. You know, we've set up how the Jedi Order gets to Khofar. Chimere and May, such an interesting dynamic in this episode because Chimere just continues to play the stupid little silly guy who occasionally like slips in a kind of thinly veiled like threat of like makes you kind of question who he really is. You know, he says like, hey, bounty hunters come here all the time. Bounty hunters I've worked with.
They said didn't they say they don't come here
all the time? Sorry, he says bounty hunters I know don't come here. Oh, he knows bounty hunters, red flag. And also the fact that he's already tracked down Kalnaka.
Yeah, can we
and
talk
knows
about
where
Chimere?
Kalnaka is. He's a hard Wookiee to find, but I risk my life to help you, May. I'm on your side. Admit it, you need me.
Yeah. I did write a note. OQ. I have everybody by their initial here. You silly little guy, but he's not a silly little guy. And you know, could he be our Tooth Fairy? Have they ever been in the same room before? Not yet. I'll keep the hope alive. I'll keep the speculation going. Why not? You know, you've never seen me and Batman in the same room.
That's true. That's true.
I see. See, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. But Chimere, bestie, what's he got on you? If you are not the Tooth Fairy, what's he got on you? Because why are you going so hard for him? Like you literally only get paid minimum wage. You know?
This might even be an unpaid internship.
Do you know what I'm saying though? He's like weirdly attached to May's mission. you know, you have to kill this Jedi without a weapon. How do you even do that? Like, he really pushes her to it. He's like, well, you didn't kill Indara or Torben without a weapon, so you have to kill Kanaka without a weapon, or else you're going to fail your mission.
Right. He says, how are you going to do it this time after you failed so many times? You killed them your way. You know, that's not the right way. Kill it the master's way.
He's bad news. Like, Chimera is bad news. He's really pushing her in a way that is like the devil on her shoulder.
100%.
She does not need that. He also says, let's see. And she asks, like, you know, like, why are you here? Kind of a vibe. And she goes, I owe him. You know how it is. He collects people. He collects people. He collects people. I have nothing of import to say about that. Let's just put like a big old pin in that one. We'll come back to it. Cause is all I have to say about that.
I mean, it makes me think of the opening crawl of the show, which mentions in dark corners of the galaxy, a powerful few learn to use the Force in secret. So maybe this is what Chimera is alluding to by he collects people. He's collecting people and training them in secret, you know, planting those seeds. But again, is he the mastermind? Is there a bigger puppeteer at play? But I think it could also be weeding out who could be somebody he vibes with. Is he trying to institute the rule of two? And he quite hasn't settled on who he wants his apprentice to be. He's the master. He's the puppeteer. Who do I want to be my apprentice? Who do I want to enact the rule of two with? Will it be Chimera? Will it be May? Could it be Osha? Somebody who is super vulnerable and has that within them to grapple with, but doesn't have the person to show them quite yet. So I think there's some questions there. That was a bit of an alarming statement, though.
Yeah, the Tooth Fairy clearly has some like deep shit on Chimera, because like he could be doing other stuff. He was a smuggler. He can speak Huttese. I'm thinking that like my headcanon about Chimera and why he is, you know, kind of indebted to the Tooth Fairy, if he's not the Tooth Fairy. I switch back and forth on my assumptions. You know what I'm saying? But I think that he in a past life procured Force artifacts for the Tooth Fairy. That is my prediction. I'm a girl who is stuck on the Kaiser device. Like, so Force artifacts are always in the back of my mind, but you know, he's a Force user. He's got to use some Force artifacts. He's got to know some things about the Force, and who's going to get those things? A smuggler, somebody who has access to artifacts and objects and, you know, things that are hard to find. So
regardless of the identity of the Tooth Fairy, and if it is Chimera, I think this episode solidified one thing at the very least, and it's that Chimera knows a lot of shit. A lot of bad shit, too. Like, he is a master manipulator, whether he is the puppeteer. I almost think of Grima Wormtongue from Lord of the Rings. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Wormtongue, but like,
you just saw my face, which was like, what?
Yeah, that's why I asked. Because like Wormtongue, so like with Rohan, like the king of Rohan was for a while being corrupted and poisoned. He was like very pale and gaunt.
Yeah.
And Wormtongue was that kind of guy at his side who was feeding him lies and kind of putting a spell over him. And it wasn't until Gandalf showed up and was like, get out of here, bitch. And then King of Rohan became himself again. Wormtongue was like a puppeteer of Saruman. Saruman was like the real big wizard. And then above that is Sauron, right? So I feel like Chimera
and
is
they're
the
different, even though their names are not that different.
Exactly. So I feel like Chimera is the Wormtongue of the Acolyte, and that he is the one that's sort of feeding things. You said it right. Like the devil on the shoulder, Soul is the angel on the shoulder, and May is trying to deal with both of these people talking to her and trying to feed her information, and she's trying to decipher all of it. But really, like, it's just the devil on the shoulder, but who's the actual devil is the question. And I think Chimera is just one other pawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, let's talk about May deciding, okay, well, Osha's alive, and my allegiance is to Osha and not to the Tooth Fairy, and I'm gonna go to Kalnaka. I'm gonna turn myself in, and yeah, I'm probably gonna go to prison, but also maybe not, because I will tell them about Tooth Fairy. She was like, I'm done. Bye.
A quick change of heart. How do you feel about that? By the way, okay,
I love it because I think it solidifies like her as a fundamentally good person who has been led down this path, as opposed to being a truly hateful person. You know what I'm saying? Like, she did do some murders. There's no getting around that. We did see those on screen. However, she did murder some people, but no, she.
I believe
we
in
did see
women's
those
rights and women's wrongs. Actually,
right.
Yeah.
She does these terrible things. However, she's not corrupted at her core. So I think that's what's important here. But also, like, this, her turning herself in is an act of self-preservation, because her sitting in prison means she's alive, as opposed to murdering somebody else or leaving and getting killed by the Tooth Fairy. But it's also a glimpse of her good side. So like, I think that was really interesting, and I liked it. And I think it also gives a lot of opportunities for May to not fall, which I don't want her to fall.
Yeah, I do like the change of heart happening in this episode. I think it sets up an interesting dynamic going forward in the season. I think maybe one of my only drawbacks of this episode was the runtime. It's less than 30 minutes when you take out the credits. And I think maybe that change of heart could have been built up a little bit more, kind of like exploring a bit of what Osha or what May is thinking. Somehow, I don't know. I think there could have maybe been a bit more of a build up, so it didn't feel as sudden. Because it seems like she's really been mulling it over. She mentions we've been in this forest for so long, and it's really got me thinking. This test, this final lesson, it's impossible. I can't do it. And Chimera says you're losing your nerve, right? Like, I think I would have liked to have seen that a little bit more, and maybe more banter between the two of them even. But that's maybe my only thought on that. But I do like it happening, because it just changes what could happen going forward.
That makes me think that that's a thoughtful criticism, because let's think about a couple of things here, right? Like, let's think about a movie, whether it be The Last Jedi or Knives Out or any movie that we really love. Those have a 2-hour runtime. And we can also think about TV. We have 8 approximately 30-minute episodes. That's going to be 4 hours of runtime. Or you can think HBO shows, which are each an hour long. So if you have 8 episodes, you have 8 hours of runtime. Or if we're going back to your cable TV, you have 16 or 22 episodes, which are about 45 minutes or a half hour, depending on the kind of show, which gives you a lot more hours to play with. And I think this show is suffering a tiny bit from being neither here nor there. I think there's a potential that this story could have been told in 2 hours, and we would have been like, wow, it's so tight. It moves so fast. It's like a really well-paced, you get on the ride and you're rip rolling, sort of a story. Or it could have been, 12, 16, 22 episodes and really drawn out. And we go, oh, it's much slower paced, but ooh, here's a twist, and ooh, here's a turn. And I think that this show being about 4 hours worth of, story makes it a little oddly paced at times. I think it's possible that once we get all the episodes and have the ability to binge them, that it maybe feel a little bit more like that movie structure. But no, I mean, I definitely agree in the sense that the pacing can feel funky in moments, because it's like, oh, we could have explored that more, or we could have jumped through it even faster.
Right. And I'm not even talking a lot, I'm not saying hey, let's go from 28 to 50 minutes, even 5 extra minutes here and there, between multiple places could really make a difference in some scenes, whether it's that one extra camera shot on a face or that one extra pause, with the conversation. Small things like that. It's not a huge drawback for me, but just something I kind of felt since this is the shortest episode we've gotten so far.
Yeah, but I think that I don't think that, 5 minutes would have changed it necessarily. I think that it needs to be double or nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like either completely expand it out or condense it. Because right, we're like stuck in this limbo at points. And obviously we've been talking about this show for an hour. This episode, this isn't like a God, I hate it. And I don't think we need to say that even, but it's interesting to me that it sits within this time frame that we don't often see for shows, and ending on these cliffhangers every time, pretty much. 1 and 2s felt a bit like, oh, we're here and now it's over. What's next? And then we don't start there necessarily. And this one felt the most earned, but it still ended on this cliffhanger of like, oh, we were just getting somewhere. Oh my gosh. So it's this funky thing where it's like, we could have just done an hour-long show and episode and given us that whole scene. Because we're going to go right back into the same scene.
Oh, I can't wait. And I can't wait for that. I think setting up that end scene, which will be our beginning for next week. Let's jump there now, because I think we've been both waiting long enough. We jump over to Kelnaka's hut. Hey, Kelnaka, food's still on the stove, buddy. What's going on? He's in his chair and he's dead. I thought we were going to get more with him, but he was a goner. Fresh saber cut right through the chest. How are you feeling? I thought about you when I saw that.
Devastated.
Yeah.
Hurt. Personally offended. It was, I have to say, tonight was tough as a Wookiee stan. I felt like I was promised a Wookiee and all I got was a dead Wookiee, and that hurt, Why would you kill a Wookiee?
Why would you?
Kill a Wookiee? Hey, High Republic authors, if you kill Buryaga, it's over. I'm out. I gotta go. Okay? We're not killing any more Wookiees on my watch. That's my thought, okay? I am Sarah, #1 Wookiee defender. You hurt a Wookiee, you meet these fists. You can't see them, but I'm punching the screen. Okay. I'm upset. But really though, so this is about like at the 26-minute mark. As soon as she like went over to Kelnaka, I knew it was a goner. I knew he was a goner, and I started yelling. It was so devastating. It was everything hurts. Why would you kill a Wookiee? Why would you bring a Wookiee into the world to kill them off? I just have some questions. They don't even they don't even have plot armor. Like there's no plot armor on the Wookiees, but there is a lot of like good feeling armor. Why would you do that?
It's understandable to be having a night, because these are the first on-screen live-action dead Wookiees that we've seen since 2005.
And it's a Wookiee Jedi. Come on,
the first.
Come on. I'm just a girl, and all I'm asking for is an alive Wookiee. Like, what is this? Anyway.
It's tough. It's tough out here.
May is innocent. It's not going to go well for her, but I do think that there are larger problems, a la the Tooth Fairy, than her being in Kelnaka's house. But also I think her being in Kelnaka's house and the Jedi showing up when they did not allow her to see literally all the writing on the wall. So that's a shame, because that could have been really interesting. Maybe we'll get that in the next episode. Absolutely devastating, the loss of Kelnaka. Kelnaka, I'm so sorry for your loss. We barely knew you. Maybe see more Kelnaka in the future. And if he also can't do anything wrong because he's a Wookiee. So sorry. But why? So like me and the Tooth Fairy have personal beef now.
We really should have seen the writing on the wall, literally, in this situation with Kelnaka. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be making jokes about Kelnaka. His body is still warm at the time of this recording.
But like, I mean, we did definitely see the writing on the wall. I just chose not to believe it. Mm-hmm. I said I'll cross that bridge when I got there, and now we're there, and I'm crossing that bridge, and I'm mad about it.
But this sets up the moment he's here, which, by the way, Star Wars, the Twitter account, like tweeted that out at 9. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess that's happening in this episode.
When the episode dropped, like the moment the episode dropped?
Yeah. The minute the episode dropped. And a minute before, I was like, are we seeing Tooth Fairy tonight? And then a minute later, he's here. I'm like, okay, question answered. Great. That's awesome. Is. So I want to take a moment to think about some wise words from our Yord. And don't worry, listener, we did not forget about Oh My Yord. That's coming up here at the very end.
Literally never forget about Oh My Yord.
Yeah. But Yord has a comment to May. May's having, Osha. God damn it. I keep doing that. Keep doing it. They're two different people. They're twins.
It doesn't help that they're played by the same person.
It's like the Parent Trap, Friends of the Force edition. I can't do it. Too many. So, Osha's having doubts about whether she can actually face May, and she doesn't want to hesitate a second time. And Yord tells her, May has always been your wound. Maybe Saul brought you here to face her, but maybe he brought you here to face yourself. And I think about that line when we see in the background a tooth fairy floating down from the sky very scarily, very, very creepily. I had chills. I had chills on my arm. But
yeah, he's
Osha,
spooky as hell.
It's very, very spooky. Osha turning around and just staring in shock, in disbelief. She's almost frozen. She's in a state of stasis. She can't move. And I think of that line.
She just witnessed a strange masked man come down from the sky.
Exactly. But I think
I too would be frozen.
But I think of Yord telling her, maybe Soul brought you here to face yourself. And I think of her looking at the Tooth Fairy.
The Tooth Fairy.
And metaphorically, maybe she's looking at herself in this moment. Again, we talked about the butterfly. There is darkness within Osha. It's just a matter of how and when that comes out, and is she able to, again, find the line to not cross. And so maybe this figure is sort of that incarnate. It's that darkness. It's the facing what's in yourself moment. Of like, am I going to be tempted here? Am I going to be scared? Am I going to know what's right and wrong? Based on my thirst for vengeance, based on my past with the Jedi, based on how I'm feeling on this planet and having that new courage because of my connection to the Force is growing again, being here.
Question.
Answer.
Is the Tooth Fairy their dad? Low key.
I mean,
even in a like a metaphorical sense and not a very literal sense.
So are we thinking that the Tooth Fairy is not Chimere?
No, I'm going back and forth every single time I talk about them. You know, I'm like, on one moment I'm like, and here's my Chimere theory, and then on the other moment I'm like, not Chimere. Chimere is just a silly little guy. You know. So I'm going back and forth. I have no. Well, we'll see. We'll find out.
I mean, it would make sense because you had your doubts last week about Anastasia. I think at one point you had doubted were they truly immaculately concepted, and Anastasia makes a point to say there was no conceived. I know words. I know vocabulary. Anastasia says there wasn't a father. They have no father. So that's set up in the show. And but why would this figure have an interest in these two twins so much?
Coral is like, well, wait until they figure out how you created them.
Mm-hmm.
How you create? She didn't necessarily create them alone. Maybe she needed someone else in the Force. Like, is the Tooth Fairy's mask going to come off and he's also going to have the dots of the Coven or some marking on his face? Like, that is the question I have. I understand that like the Coven is a female centric space of the Force power, but like it makes me wonder.
I think the identity of, as the subtitles and credits call, the Stranger, which we continue calling the Tooth Fairy for obvious reasons. It's much more fun.
The Stranger specifically in the credits of the stunt credits, because he's not in the like guest credits, which also makes me think, it's Chimere, because they didn't credit a new actor, therefore. But they also have somebody who's playing his stunt double, and that's how we know that he's called so far the Stranger. Which also, like, this gets into my pet peeve about Star Wars not naming people. You know what I'm saying? Not like the mother is kind of an exception because she does have a name, but like Frog Lady or the Client or any number of things in Mando.
The Mandalorian.
Mando. The Mandalorian. Yeah, they get like literally.
The
like,
Boba Fett.
Literally.
The Obi-Wan.
The Boba Fett. But no, there's like so many. There's so many characters. No, there's literally so many characters though in in Mando that are the something.
Yeah.
They don't have an actual name.
Well, I think we'll get a name for the stranger, but to
I know,
keep
that's
that shroud of
it's like a petty complaint. Okay,
mystery,
let me have my petty complaint.
No, this is a
Let
no
me have
complaint podcast. Actually, I'm just kidding.
No, actually, I want to complain.
I have a complaint. Can I see your manager? I'm the manager.
I do not get my shill paycheck. Okay, I don't get a shill paycheck. Therefore, I can have thoughts.
Oh, you didn't get your shill paycheck this month?
You got one?
Mm-hmm. It was 67 cents.
The residuals are not working out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I want to hop back to May for a second.
Okay.
Because, and Osha, I'll get there. Because, you were saying, well, Osha is going to face herself, but May is herself. Is she not? You are with me. I am with you. Always one, but born as two.
Excellent
as above
point.
sits the stars and below lies the sea. I give you you and you give me me. They are two halves of a whole. They are intrinsically connected.
That's also a great point. Yeah. I think there could be like dual meaning to what Yord says. I think probably the most direct meaning of it is facing May and finally having that moment to face May. But I do think we will continue to explore Osha's dark side tendencies and that push and pull, and can she bring herself back from the edge? Metaphorically speaking, we've already seen her at an edge of a cliff in episode 1, and Soul was the one to pull her back from the edge, literally with the Force, right? So it's like she's gonna have that moment once again, I'm sure, but it's much more dire, many more consequences that could happen. But I want to ask you, like, what did you think of the setup of the scene, like with the day shifting to night? I'm gonna guess the next episode's called Night, but how did you feel about the final like introduction of Tooth Fairy and just the way that it doesn't say any words, nothing is spoken, it's only nonverbal and just creepy?
That fucking mask, man.
It worked. It really worked.
It's the best Star Wars mask, and it's so incredibly scary. Like, it's genuinely spooky. It's so eerie. I hate it. I love it. I think the setup is really great. Like, we know where it's headed. Like, it's getting bad. It's going down, and it's like telegraphed for 5 minutes leading up to it practically. When we see the Tooth Fairy float down, which the fact that he's floating is insane. Very interesting. The sound from, the score from Michael Abels is so rumbly. It's like this, it feels like chaos in the Force. It feels like disruption. And I love that. And then it comes into this low strings, and I think that is so impactful because we're getting like a little bit of a sound associated with the Tooth Fairy there, but we're also getting the sound in the setting, which is just everything has hit the fan, which I loved. Then Jackie saying, "What is that?" Like they've never seen someone like this before. They've never encountered a foe that like this or this menacing or this creepy. And I think it's the teeth. The teeth throw Jackie off. It's interesting because like I also feel like his cape, like the mask is obviously gonna, when you put on a motorcycle helmet, my brother rides a motorcycle, so here we go. When you put on a motorcycle helmet, it makes your head look gigantic because there's a lot of padding in there, and they're very serious about that. It's kind of the same thing on the Tooth Fairy. It seems like he has a small stature, but it's just a really big mask.
Yeah, and we get a bit more of the appearance. I know people have been pointing out the hands of the stranger, and I think maybe there could be some questions of like, this doesn't look like Kymir's hands. It might not be Kymir, but like the statue of Kymir kind of looks a little similar. Like we know he was just left hanging in the forest. Like, could he have gotten down and did his little Superman change of clothes, spin around a phone booth moment? And where he goes in a phone booth, spins around, and then he's all of a sudden he's masked and has a robe on.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Don't we all?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's possible. Yeah. Looking at, I think the timestamp is 28:22 is where we see his hands. He's not gloved, which is really interesting to me. Since of course such a key part of Ben is the gloves. But he's not gloved, so we do see his hands. His hands appear to be big. Like he has kind of like big fingers. I don't know how to sound normal when talking about somebody's hands. I'm sorry, but like he's kind of got big hands. So you know, it doesn't necessarily match Manny Jacinto. So it's like it's probably not Khmer, but like I'm gonna ride that train into the station and then realize that I've gotten off at the wrong stop, and it's fine. It's okay. It's okay. But also, if we can talk about the mask right before that, when him and Osha are literally face to face, he decided to get all up in Osha's personal space. I would have been like, "Whoa, 6 feet, social distancing."
He was looking for cavities, to be clear. He was checking
for cavities.
He was checking in there.
You think that he is like a creepy clown dentist, and this whole vibe is like, I'm gonna show all of these teeth, and you better have a big smile to show you your teeth, kind of a vibe?
Maybe.
I mean,
maybe he's got braces and he wears the mask because he's really self-conscious about his rubber bands. Doesn't want everybody to see. Yeah.
It's really kind of embarrassing for him. Anyway, the mask itself. This is again where we go back to, for me, to Force artifacts, and stuff of that nature. The mask itself looks rusted or like barnacled a little bit, especially towards the back of the head.
So it looks like it's been put back together almost like Kintsugi, right? From The Rise of Skywalker.
It seems like there's all these kind of like lesions or abrasions in it that seem like a rust away of the smooth outer surface of the mask in the back, which is like, ooh, where's that mask been? You know, in the bottom of the ocean, did Khmer go get it for you? You know?
Yeah, no, this moment though between Tooth Fairy and Osha is so telling, right? It's a moment of quiet. If he wanted to kill Osha in that moment, he could very easily.
No doubt.
He wants to keep Osha alive. I mean, he flings her off into the distance and yeets her, but...
Or he just feels that she's inconsequential in this moment.
Right. But I think like really the tides are shifting. Like Osha is the target. Osha is the one who has been trained by the Jedi. She's the one who has something within her that hasn't been explored quite yet in terms of like the dark side, maybe, right? Like she's somebody who would be like a prime candidate to try to turn, because to some degree, May is already trying, but not really succeeding. And so for her, it was easy to just kind of give up and say, I'm just going to stop. I don't need to do this anymore. But for Osha, it's that unknown of, could I get to that point? Is there a greater thing I could be doing? You know, I'm feeling the Force again in ways I haven't felt in a long time. Being here, I want to explore that a little bit. And I think whoever is orchestrating all this in the background wanted this moment to happen. They wanted May to be here. They wanted Osha to end up back here with the Jedi. I think this was all orchestrated down to a T. And whoever is doing the orchestrating is playing right into their hand perfectly. But do you feel like Osha is kind of the key to all of this, to use one of our infamous High Republic phrases? But do you feel like she is kind of the target, capital T?
I mean, I feel like if she wasn't part of the equation before, she's absolutely part of the equation now. Now that the sisters are in the same place. You know? I mean, I definitely think she's the key to all of this, but all of this, what is all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key to all of this, meaning whatever larger purpose, whatever larger chess game is happening,
right?
And how these pieces are moved. And to your point, was Osha a chess piece that just got added, or was she the one that was sitting in the back and is finally moving forward?
Right.
You know,
right.
In a very significant way, and jumping all the other pieces. So
time will tell.
Totally. You had one other thought on the Tooth Fairy as well, in terms of how it might have gotten here.
And that is, well, I doubt he could get here without a guide. What does that mean? Is he over on that Octo oceany planet situation? And he can't leave by himself, or he presumably can't leave by himself. Who could bring him to Khofar, to Kalnaka the Jedi? Oh, Khmer. Chimera could guide him. Didn't Chimera already scout for May?
Yes. Yeah,
Chimera,
Chimera knew where Kalnaka was.
You're just a silly little guy, but are you?
Absolutely not.
He's really he's got like a foam finger #1 fan of the Tooth Fairy. He's like really riding for him for May. I just think that May's comment is interesting because maybe he doesn't have a lot of connections, but I wonder who could connect him. Our good little buddy, Q.
Oh man, I can't wait to see where this goes next week. I feel like episode 5 just got to be good. It's just got to be good. There's no way it can be bad. We might lose some people next week.
You know, Soul's either dying or he's not dying. You know what I'm saying? But there's not like a Soul, like Soul's either dead in the ground 6 feet under, and we're gonna put the gravestone, like we're gonna put the headstone in there, or he's like alive and everything is about to fall apart. Like these are the two options that I see as an outcome of this situation.
Well, I now have 7 days to stew over this and think about what the heck's going to happen. So that's far too many days.
It really is.
You know,
it really is.
Yeah. But I think we're at the end of our discussion here. Pretty much a banger ending. I think this is one of the more successful cliffhangers of the show, and it's the most excited I've felt for the next following week. So can't wait. But before we wrap up, it's time for the Yord Horde in our new segment that we're doing every week. It's our Oh My Yord moment of the week. Sarah,
right.
Kick us off with your Oh My Yord.
It's easy. It's easy. My Twitter bio is, I think I'm really funny, but I think people think I'm less funny than I think I am, which has been my Twitter bio for almost 10 years. I'm very serious about that statement. I don't know why, but you know, I got a Yord. When I heard Yord say this, I felt that in myself, which was, I swear we need a tracker to track our tracker. And I said, yeah, I get it. Sometimes you just got to come up with a sentence that rolls right off the tongue in such a way.
We do love our alliteration here on the pod. This is a great part too to call out Basil. We haven't talked about Basil. I was saving Basil for my Oh My Yord because the two are kind of intertwined, but Basil, right. I love Basil. What'd you think of Basil?
Basil, what a guy. I love the Basil hype on Twitter, and Basil's just a guy. He's doing his best out there and he's good at his job. Sometimes he gets a little lost in the work, and I understand that because he's good at it.
What's your Basil fandom preference? Is it Basil Babes? Baz Batch?
No. I am absolutely the Baz Batch.
Okay, yeah. Baz Batch.
Sorry to everybody who has other opinions, but the Baz Batch is too good to consider other options.
We can do both too. You know, why not both? We can dabble in both, the dark and the light. It's a violent act to separate the two. Why separate Baz Batch and Basil Babes?
Right.
All of the above. Do both. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Basil. I can't wait to see if Basil returns. There is a Funko Pop of Basil, so I am tempted. I did pre-order my Yord Pop.
Funko Pop yet?
There is not.
How is there a Basil Funko Pop but not a Kalnaka Pop? In this essay, I will fight.
Because Kalnaka is a goner. That's why. Sorry.
And Basil gets to live?
Yeah, Basil's a cute little guy. Can't kill Basil.
I mean, you can't kill Basil, but you can kill Kalnaka. Make it make sense. Make it make sense.
My Oh My Yord moment of the week, I would say I have two, and I'm going to cheat just because I want to talk more about Yord. The first is when he's telling Osha, you're going to need to hand over that blaster. It's actually property of the Jedi Order. I'm going to have to insist you hand it over. He's such a stickler. But back to Basil is when he's talking about how many Jedi at the temple chose to learn Shriwook. And he's like, I chose a more sophisticated language of Tinin or whatever, which is the language of Basil. And I thought that was great. I thought that was just a
language with more nuance.
Right. It's like when everybody in college is learning Spanish and they're just like, I've been doing Spanish for 8 years. And then that one guy who's like, I actually switched to French my senior year and I took 4 French classes because I wanted to learn French. You're like, bruh, come on.
We had 3 language options in my high school: Spanish, French, and German. And I was like, I'll take German.
It's like, come on.
It's me.
You just got to get the
sorry.
A. You just got to pass. Why do you got to choose the tough language? Come on.
Well, that would be choosing French. Choosing German. German is pretty analogous to English in many ways.
But I love that little Yord moment. So that was all I had this week. But any other final thoughts? We've been going for almost 2 hours on this 20-some minute episode, which is pretty incredible.
I think we've talked longer about this one than the other one. Yeah, my last one is, I thought it was really funny when she's like, I'm not wearing the civilian robe. Cut to her in the civilian robe. Also, like, why does a civilian robe exist? Like, I have so many questions and thoughts, but like, it's not particularly important.
It was great. A lot of funny moments in the show. With that being said, Sarah, I think that is the end of our episode. Thank you everybody for listening. If you want to hear more from us in the coming weeks on the Acolyte appetite, all things Acolyte. I just added even more alliteration there. I'm proud of myself.
I really liked that.
Us,
keep going.
You can find us on all of our socials and any podcast platform of your choice. Make sure you're following us there for the latest updates. We also have some Temptation of the Force related things coming out in the weeks ahead. So stay tuned for that.
Get hyped, High Republic fans, because Temptation of the Force is so good. But thank you to anyone who listens to just these episodes, just the High Republic episodes. Well, if you're listening to just the book episodes, then you're not going to be here. But like, thanks anyway. Thanks to everybody who takes the time out of their day to listen to our episodes. We're very grateful. And thanks to our patrons who help support the show and keep the lights on. We're very grateful for you guys as well. So thanks to Brian, Ben, Cheryl, Clay, David, Emma, Jennifer, Katie, Knights of Ren, Leanne, Logan, Lucy, Lindsay, Leanne, Matthew, Nathan, Nicole, Rob, Ruth, Santa, Sky Talkers, Tom, and Travis. Very grateful for all your support. Please stay hydrated. Please stay healthy. Yep, that's it. Be well.
Be well, and don't have the Tooth Fairy visit you at night. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, may the Force be with you always.
Bye-bye.